welcome to another episode of Made In. I can see people gradually coming into the room, so we will take our time to get started. It's 2 p.m. in California. It's 7 a.m. here in Melbourne, Australia. Ron, good to see you again.
Good to see you.
Looking
it's been
forward,
a couple weeks.
Looking forward to this one very much. It's great to get such a diverse set of guests on the last two episodes. We've had a couple of people from the investment world, which I think has been really interesting and shone a kind of a different light on things. And today it's great to have one of the big Taiwanese companies participating. So very much looking forward to that. But before we get into that, what's been catching your eye in the news? What's been making you sit up and think this week?
Well, with the U.S. elections coming, the U.S. state of Wisconsin's kind of a battleground state. Early on, our president was kind of touting this new Foxconn deal. Foxconn's going to invest $10 billion, and it's going to be the eighth wonder of the world. This massive factory is going to have 5 billion square feet. Well, so far they've got kind of one building up, and instead of investing 10 billion, they're about 180 million in. And, they've created 550 jobs. It's kind of a sticking point in Wisconsin. There certainly was an expectation it was coming a lot faster than that. So it's going to be interesting to see how that plays in with the election.
Do you think in this election cycle, supply chain and manufacturing is maybe more important than it's ever been? One from the job standpoint with respect to manufacturing and the recovery, but also that whole dependence, unraveling that dependence on China. Do you think it's something that will play, or do people just vote with
I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that in the presidential debates, for the first time in U.S. history, we will hear the word supply chain in a presidential debate.
Yeah,
mainly
the word supply chain.
Mainly as it
supply
relates
chain's
to,
come up in many places.
Yeah, mainly as it relates to securing medical equipment, PPE, and that type of stuff. But it is a big issue. Trump kind of ran on you're going to bring a bunch of manufacturing jobs, and there were some jobs, not quite as many, but I mean right now manufacturing employment in the U.S. is about 500,000 below where it was 4 years ago. So going to be interested to see where that goes. Another thing that caught my eye was Sony's announcement that they are facing meaningful supply chain constraints. They didn't talk about what those were for the PlayStation 5. And so they're expecting to not have quite as many on the shelf as they would like to, which I think generally works in their favor anyway. When they're hard to get, you get a little bit of free buzz and stuff like that. And then, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
NVIDIA, the big graphics graphics processing chip maker, is in a $40 billion deal to buy ARM Holdings from SoftBank. So now they would have both CPUs and GPUs. And I have a question as to, what the EU regulators will think about that, but also the Chinese regulators. I mean, we've been firing a lot of shots over China's bow, not well thought out shots of lately. This TikTok thing that we've talked about in the past. And so I would be very surprised if China didn't raise serious objections to those two companies getting together.
Yeah. And quickly before we introduce our guests, what about Golden Week coming up? Does that have an impact similar to Chinese New Year, or did we learn stuff from this year's Chinese New Year and the whole nobody coming back to work experience that will help us be more prepared this time?
Golden Week is not as disruptive as Chinese New Year, in part because there's not as much travel involved, and it's a little bit shorter. But most people that are sourcing in China or having products manufactured in China, I mean, they understand how to plan around the holidays and stuff. So I don't think it's going to be much of an issue.
Yeah, so much less disruptive. Well, with that, let's get our guest on and explore some of the topics with Ram. If you'd like to take the introduction, you've known Ram for some years.
Yeah, so today our guest is Ram Dornala. Ram has been in the EMS/ODM industry for, well, I'll let him fill in the number of years, but a whole lot of them. And he is currently Senior Vice President with Wistron. You know, Wistron is one of the kind of the big four Taiwanese ODM/EMS players, and that space is really dominated by them. I mean, we think of big companies like, you know, Flex and Jabil here in the U.S., but most of those are relatively small compared to the big Taiwanese guys. So with that, welcome, Ram.
Hi, Phil.
Hi, great to have you here. Maybe just as a kind of an outline, you know, talk a little bit about what Wistron's experience has been this year and what you've seen as you've gone through this whole disruptive 2020.
Oh, definitely. Thanks for the invite. Yeah, I was listening to Ron before coming on. I think he summarized some of the things fairly well. It's been definitely disruptive for pretty much everybody. I don't think Wistron is excluded. Things are different. Things are completely different in some areas where we're seeing like huge upside. Like, you know, for example, home office has been one of the biggest beneficiary, right? So we're big into collaboration products, and that part of the products have been doing really well for us. Being what I call a universal partner, it's kind of my thing of where we could do pretty much everything for the customer. Some of the customers in this space have utilized everything that we could do, from an industrial design all the way to component sourcing to ODM to manufacture. So they benefited quite a bit. So no one has to travel, no one has to design. Pretty much, you know, we used WebEx, Zoom to design. So things are going fairly well. But in some areas, you know, we definitely seen a drop in revenue, drop in manufacturing. And the biggest beneficiary, actually, 2 years ago when a company asked me to come, they asked me to grow the business. Maybe I was lucky. I gave them 7 strategic initiatives. The first one happens to be global footprint. And I told them, right, yeah, global footprint is not a differentiator. It's a table stake. So if you don't have a global footprint, you know, actually I was talking to a startup company yesterday. They have $10 million spend. They were asking for global footprint. I'm like, wow.
Yeah.
So that has changed. So yeah. So that's definitely been a differentiator. But we're seeing instead of China being the dominant supply chain, it's actually better for the entire world. I know I heard you guys talk about, you know, supply chain might coming up in our, you know, election debates, first debate. So it's been a good thing for actually the entire world where the supply chain is balanced.
Okay, curious what the other 6 of your 7 initiatives are. It'll be interesting to talk a bit about those. But let's get straight in on that global footprint. Over the last 2, 3, 4 years, your footprint and your output has changed, and we were talking a bit about that on air. Give me a quick picture of kind of where you were in terms of your global manufacturing capacity and where you are now.
Definitely. You know, typical ODM, we've always, you know, Taiwanese ODMs dominate probably 90-95% of the market, right? So Ron mentioned the top ones, you know, Foxconn, Quanta, Wistron, Pegatron. Pretty much most of the footprints have been designed in Taiwan and manufactured in China. That has been the case, right? So over the past 4 or 5 years, I think every one of us has been looking. We were actually looking for a reason to change, right? No, so it started with the geopolitical risk, and then the tariffs came in, and then the pandemic came in, and you know, we prepared fairly well. Now today, if I have to, you know, take a wild guess, right? The numbers change every hour. It's not every day. We're moving products to Southeast Asia. We're into India. We're into North America. Now the customers are even asking, can you do the low-touch DF model in the U.S.? So Ron was mentioning, you know, the manufacturing jobs are still not at the pre-COVID times. But I think personally, I think that's going to be changing. So for me, inside the company, my advice to the company is don't work on today, which is the COVID-related issues. Look for the future. Whether it's whichever the government comes in. I think nationalistic views are fairly strong across the globe. It's not just one country or the other country. So they're going to be demanding something different. So the more diverse you are, more global you are today, it's better. So going back, answering your question, if I have to take a wild guess, probably 40% of the manufacturing has been in process of shifting or shifted out of China into the other regions.
Yeah, it's fascinating, isn't it? You've got this strange mix. I'm hearing some echo. Is that coming from your end, Ron, or
I don't
know.
think so.
There's a strange echo.
Sound like somebody
Ron
coughing.
and I both got headphones on. No, I think it was just an echo of my my mic. No, I think it's really interesting, Ram, because there's this almost nationalistic, anti-global feeling. But as you say, that idea of having a global footprint is so important. And when you get a relatively modest startup that's actually thinking we need a global footprint just to be able to scale our product, that's an interesting process in terms of the way they think. When you look at the other regions that you've shifted production to, talk me through a couple of those. I was really interested in India. What kind of product mix has moved to India? Is that partly thinking about the Indian consumer?
I believe it started as the Indian consumer being the next China, right? It's mostly on the mobility products, where India has been fairly in this nationalistic view for a long period of time. So, but things have changed now. So people are talking India for export. I personally started that 7 years ago. Definitely failed, right? So in the previous company, we did because the infrastructure is not there. It's still not going to be there for a long period of time. Democracy is sometimes against yourself. So it hasn't worked in the past. But I think the timing is maybe right. Right? It's all about timing. Yeah. It's all about the market transition, and you just have to catch the right market transition. And when the economy is good, people tend to invest, right? So for the first time, I know Ron's example of one of our competitor, saying a lot of a big number, but not investing. But India has been actually every one of our competition has been looking at India, especially, and you've probably seen in the news, Samsung's moving production from globally into India, right? So I mean, even going from other Southeast Asian countries as well. So definitely India has the talent. India has the market. India could be, can probably not could be China, but India could be a dominant player as long as they change the way they do business.
Yeah, that challenge of bureaucracy is a big thing, and that in some ways is connected to democracy and being able to have that industrial policy that you can set for 10, 20 years at a time as a single government is pretty valuable, isn't it? Correct. What about Mexico? Mexico just seems to be seeing a flood of investment, particularly from Asian companies. You're building up your footprint there. Tell me a bit about that strategy.
So we've been in Mexico for 20 plus years. For one of the smart phone manufacturer back 10 years ago, we were one of the two biggest ones manufacturer end to end from the SMT all the way to reverse logistics. We've done it in Mexico. And then there was a short period of time where the smartphone market went from one major OEM to the other major OEM. So we didn't participate in that new OEM. So we were kind of caught a little bit by surprise, and then we've invested quite millions of dollars. So we moved all the manufacturing back. So one of my biggest initiative, like I said, I have to go fight back with the company and then bring the manufacturing back. That turned out to be one of the best decisions the company's ever made. Like you mentioned, our footprint's probably 2.5 million square feet right now in the campus that we have, and it's pretty much full. We're expanding right next to it. We're probably going to build a couple of more campuses within the next 2 years, right? So if not faster. So just to give you an example, a year ago, we didn't have a single SMT line. We're looking at 8 SMT lines by the end of the year. So it's been a quite remarkable journey in Mexico, and we strongly believe in Mexico because of the type of business we're in. We're an enterprise business. You want it to be geographically close to the customer, and we've been doing the landed cost modeling for 15, 20 years. Mexico has always shown at a landed cost model being the best place to invest, but we were never able to make use of it because the efficiency factors, a few other factors are not there in Mexico. But I think for the first time, we see that changing as well. I think, you talked about some about the supply chain, the amount of investments, initiatives that we have in supply chain in Mexico will definitely, put us in the right spot.
Yeah, and do you see not just those startups, but do you see your large OEMs asking you about changes in footprint, about China Plus strategy, shifting their volumes, or is it pretty much led by your own strategy and they're responding to that?
So it started as our own strategy because we wanted to grow. We wanted to grow significantly higher than where we are. We're a $30 billion company, but we still have aspirations of growing big. And we knew Mexico is definitely not an option, right? So we needed to do it. And when we started, there were a few OEMs. Actually, we do, if you look at the server space that we dominate, 8 out of the 9 big companies we do business with. So you pretty much name any of the big OEM today that makes a server, is a Wistron customer. So at the time when we started, so we did ask, CEO did ask, it's like, I know you're telling me that few customers would like it, but no one's coming asking me. Fast forward 1 year, every one of those customers are actually booked the lines and they're moving the lines. So definitely they did not ask. We started as our own initiative. Today it's becoming one of the key differentiators for us.
Yeah, and it's really interesting. You obviously got to it first. You obviously got ahead of that. And you were ready. So, and it was partly tariffs and the trade wars that were making you think of that prior to the COVID situation.
So tariffs were definitely not in our discussion at the time. So this happened pre-tariffs. We wanted to do the landed cost modeling, and we wanted to move our footprint balanced, whether it's a geopolitical risk or any other risk. So it's been, actually in my previous company, I started that initiative in 2011, right? So it's been a long time ago. So I brought the similar kind of thought process into the company, and then we started with that. But tariffs definitely helped. I got a really good success story on that one. The way we convinced our first customer to move is we told them we would like to do a dual launch of the same product that we do design today. So since we pretty much do all the heavy lifting, customer was completely fine with it. So we did the dual launch. That happened October of last year. And during the January, February time, we were already up and running. And we had a COVID situation in China. So we could not do anything. So factory were shut down for probably 2 months or 3 months. So we did pretty much all the lifting in Mexico. We've done all the manufacturing. Fast forward to April, May timeframe, Mexico was facing a huge COVID. So we moved all the Mexico manufacturing back to China, same product. Customer was not involved, not a single person traveled. There was nothing needed except customer had to approve some gold cards or some small test investments, typically which they do. And this is I'm talking one of the best customer that knows the supply chain. So they've looked at it, and it's been 4 months. They keep telling me how great our company did. So it's been probably one of the best success stories I could say. What I call is a dual launch of the same product. If you have the volumes, do it in China or Southeast Asia for the Europe, Asia markets, and then do it in Mexico for the North American market. So
Yeah.
if you make your landed cost one of the best.
And I can imagine people saying, how do you do that? Because it's, switching from one to the other. Is that something that you kind of plan to do and you've had to build out digital strategies and ways of, do you have the same lines in multiple locations? How do you make it easy to move stuff from one geography quickly and seamlessly to another?
So this is kind of a very, loaded question. So when we did in Mexico, we have a recipe. But the way we do it is we send our Mexico team to China, and they learn everything from China for 3 months. And then we move the China team with them to Mexico, and they live in Mexico for 3 months. So the Mexico launch is always difficult. So we leverage heavily onto China. And when going back to China, actually, this is one of the product that I'm talking about is one of the cloud-based product. So the customer demand was tripled during the COVID time because everyone's using, whether it's Zoom or, other products, right? So China actually went from 2.8K per month capacity, which is what we committed to customer, to 18K per month within 20 days. I have absolutely no idea how they did it. Honestly, I was never part of anything like that. I didn't travel, we did not have people from, US or any other place to go help them. We went from 2.8K to 18K per month within, 6 weeks time period. So, we had the material already locked because we were going to build it in Mexico anyways. So the material was not the gate. It's pure capacity, pure will. Honestly, if you ask me to do the same thing, reverse in Mexico, we definitely will struggle. But China being the center of excellence, we've done fairly well. When we did the dual launch purpose was not for pandemic. Honestly, that was not even our thought process. Dual launch was purely for the landed cost advantage. With the tariffs, it helped a little bit more, but even without the tariffs, doing the Asia-based requirements out of China and doing the North American-based requirement out of Mexico, that was the reason for the dual launch.
So Ron, you talked a little bit, before we got on about Southeast Asia. What are you guys doing in Southeast Asia? And if you had to guess, which country outside of China, which Southeast Asian country you guys are going to we're going to invest the most in over the next 5 years, where do you think that would be, and why do you think that?
So depending on the business needs, depending on what the customer needs. So I'm always a firm believer, my previous company CEO, I'm going to name him, Mr. Tim Main. One thing that he taught me over the years is you do what's best for the customer. You do the solutions based on the customer. And you understand their needs before they even think they're the needs, right? So based on that one, we kind of divided what Southeast Asia needs is into 3 different buckets. So we have Malaysia, we have Vietnam, and we have Philippines. So depending on the type of product, depending on the type of requirement, for example, you ask, what's the ask? If you are looking for the lowest manufacturing cost possible, Vietnam is the place we're suggesting to them. And we're going to tell them, we're going to educate them, yes, if I have a collaboration products or home office products, absolutely, Vietnam's a great place. But if a customer that's coming and saying that, hey, I need you to do Ethernet switching with, unbelievable technology and everything, we probably move him to Malaysia.
Yeah.
Because Malaysia has the most talent. It's probably as close as China, except minus the scalability piece of it. Because majority of my team that's in China or other places, they do come from Malaysia. So Malaysia definitely has the talent. Malaysia does not have the footprint, the expansion. It's a small island. People jump from company to company, so it's not scalable. So there's other turns. So if it's technology, definitely going to Malaysia. If it's a pure manufacturing cost is what driving you, we'll put them in Vietnam. If I have some other needs, or if I have to fill a factory, Philippines also is coming into place.
So you guys aren't doing anything in Indonesia. I know a lot of the competitors are in Indonesia. Big labor force, some other challenges. But what are your thoughts there?
Indonesia is another India, right? So definitely challenges. We did have a requirement. The way I convinced this customer is for Indonesia and Brazil requirements, instead of me going and investing, why don't we partner with a local partner? So where we help them with the supply chain, where we help them with the manufacturing know-how, we teach them, but we partner with them to solve your needs. So the customer was pretty impressed. We're going to start that in Brazil sooner before we do Indonesia. But yeah, so Indonesia is definitely, you're absolutely right. They got the talent, they got the manpower, and the government's actually also friendly to do business. But we actually Wistron wise, we haven't made any investments at this point.
And those partnerships that you mentioned there, Ram, that's really interesting. Are you looking at kind of changes there in terms of business models, changing how you actually create a global footprint? Because as you mentioned, if global footprint's table stakes and you need to be in almost every country, some of that is very practical as investment and scale. Some of it requires a different approach. Are you starting to be a little bit more maybe disruptive or creative there in terms of how you provide that capacity?
Absolutely, great question. Actually, we have a lot of customers that are actually asking us to go beyond that one. It's not just about manufacturing. It's about how you bring the product to market. So they're asking us, for example, if you look at the companies in India, some of them provide our customers from some of the design experience to product launch experience to reverse logistics experience. They're asking us actually, how do you make the best out of both of you? So where you could go partnership with a company like I'm just naming it. We were not doing anything with them, a Wipro or a TCL or somebody, right? So how do you create an ecosystem where the customer benefits, and then in the same process, all the companies benefit as well? So where we can collaborate and then bring everything together, because some of these people, they know how to launch the product for that particular customer. It's impossible for the customer to teach us or other EMS partner or the ODM partner to teach everything. So I think this pandemic is teaching us a lot of new things. One of the things that's on my probably will be in the new initiatives is how do we partnership, whether it's a manufacturing partnership or the entire ecosystem partnership or a software partnership or the industrial design partnership. How do we provide the compelling universal partner kind of relationship, taking it beyond what I mentioned in my original universal partner, which is PCBA to reverse logistics, right? So definitely it's top of our mind. We're in the early discussions with few, but we would definitely, probably 2021, that would probably list as one of the top initiatives.
Yeah, and I think that universal partnership model that you talk about is really interesting. And I always see two routes to expansion. One is across the value chain, and the other is across the world, and they're equally important. But what I think is really fascinating there is your idea of building this ecosystem, this manufacturing or complete product lifestyle ecosystem that includes yourself perhaps at the core, but a whole bunch of other companies and partners. Are partners keen to get on board? Are you finding COVID has made people more responsive to the idea of collaboration than perhaps previously?
It's a mixed. So when it comes to manufacturing, they definitely would like to partner with you because we can teach, we can bring the business, we could be the big brother, so everybody benefits. In the other partnerships, there is no established business model, right? So how do you do the revenue sharing? So you're doing the PLM part of the piece, and I'm doing the manufacturing design and everything. So how do we share the profits, right? So if you look at a typical EMS or an ODM, the profit percentages are 1 to 5%. And if you look at some of the PLM guys that are talking, they want 20, 25%. So how do you got to have an open and honest discussions, and it's got to be a win-win for us to, partner. And early discussions, and it's probably, I would say, started within the last 6 weeks, and it's gaining momentum.
Ron, what about you? You guys are all about bringing manufacturing ecosystems together. Are you finding people more collaborative right now?
Yeah, I think so. I think some of are kind of being forced to be a little bit more collaborative. People are not traveling as much. There's travel bans, whether they're country travel bans or company travel bans. So I think people are thinking about new ways of getting things done. And so part of that is partnering with people that, you know, either have the footprint that you need or have a service that, you know, is not truly in your core, but that you need to expand or get better at. So I do think that people are a little bit more open to collaboration, in part because they're being forced into it.
Yeah, and as Ram says, it makes sense in the, you know, in the manufacturing and the technology space, and the tools there are all in place to do that. It's getting that commercial and the business and the profit share aspect right when you're in industries that have very, very different margin models, very, very different valuation models. That becomes a different challenge. One of the things I wanted to touch on, Ram, with respect to what's gone on this year, but also what's gone on in the scaling of your business, is that whole digital transformation. Was that strategy in place early, and has that helped you expand, or is that something that COVID has really accelerated?
Definitely COVID accelerated. We've seen more of those requests post-COVID than the pre-COVID. You know, pre-COVID, the customer wanted to have a very high-touch model. I think it's changing so drastic. Some of them customers are like, essentially, here's the napkin, you know, go make it happen.
Yeah, so they're putting a lot of demand on you. When you look at your digital transformation, is part of that, when you go to new geographies, is part of that building up that scale with more automation, or how do you, when you're looking at a new plant, is it heavily digitally transformed?
One thing I learned joining this company is this company is great. You know, in the past, I thought what benefits everything is like having a company vision and mission, and then push that culture down to the geographies and everything. So what I learned more in this company is more adapt to the culture of where you go in, and then get the best out of the people and the team there. So I'll give you a good example of the question that you asked. So the product that I mentioned that we moved from China to do a launch into Mexico, we gave the Mexico team a challenge of like, hey, here is the manufacturing value add that we need to get to. Here is the target and how you get to it. So the amount of automation that the team has done in Mexico that was not done in China, it was amazing. From how you put the DIMMs using the robots, how you do the entire back-end testing using the robots with almost no human touch. And we're actually surprised, and then we're taking it back to China, and then say, hey, you need to implement too, because you know it's a huge savings. So to answer your question, we're getting the best out of the people, and then at the same time creating a decent level of competition between the teams, and at the same time collaborate. You know, Wistron's one good thing with the Wistron is we're a global P&L. The site GM or site does not get involved in, you know, where is the money, you know, I have to be profitable. So it's a very selfless collaboration between the factories, with the competition being, how does the customer grade you? So that's the competition. We're not grading, oh, you're $2, you know, the other, you know, companies, you know, other factories, $3. It's more, you know, hey, the customer thought you understood their needs much better than our China factory. So that kind of creates, you know, nice internal competition to become the best and to share the best practices.
Yeah, and that automation isn't just about saving money in production. It is about higher quality. It's perhaps about more responsiveness to the customer. Those KPIs that are measured by the customer. Is that automation having an impact on comparative landed costs? Is that helping you level the cost of manufacturing in different geographies where maybe labor is at a higher rate?
Definitely. So it's not one lever that we could push, the automation. The supply chain plays a huge role. I mean, Ron probably seen it. We've been trying for 20 years to move some of the key supply chain like a sheet metal or the plastics or the power supply or the racks manufacturing into Mexico. Every one of us tried. It has been a difficult journey until now. Now I'm seeing it's completely different industry. So automation is probably somewhere, brings us 20 to 25% of the value add. The remaining 75% actually must come from the supply chain landed cost. We should not be putting 4 to 6 weeks worth of metal on a boat and then shipping it to, because, there is a cost of capital, there is a shipment cost. We tend to air freight because we don't know what our customer demands are. So there's a lot of savings in order for us to get to cost neutral. To answer your question, supply chain plays 75% of the role, manufacturing is 25%. So yeah, the automation is definitely helping us get to the 25%. And the other thing we do fairly well in the company is, especially with this dual launch, what we learned, countries like Mexico, that's kind of like, trying to build the manufacturing excellence. We tend to give them fixed capacity so that you can optimize, you can bring the cost down. For a country like China, where it's our center of excellence, we tend to move up and down. So any of the variation that we see, the down or the up, we give it to China. We challenge China because China is capable of handling it, while we give the fixed so that we don't hurt our bottom line. At the same time, we give the customer the solution that they want.
Ram, you were talking about your customers have, especially pre-COVID, had a fairly high-touch model. How has that changed with COVID? And specifically, are there new digital tools that you're using? Are there new Industry 4.0 tools that have been accelerated at Wistron because of the new distance between you and the customer?
Oh, very good question. I don't know the Industry 4.0, which is huge inside the company. We have any kind of dashboard that you could ask. I can tell you what my manufacturing overhead for particular product last week. So the customers actually weren't that impressed with the Industry 4.0 tools. They knew that we had pre-COVID. They're not asking for more in post-COVID. They're more asking, Ram, I have this 27-inch display that I need to give it to my end customer. Can you come up with a few proposals? So we'll go back and then we'll have few industrial designs, few cost models, few launch models, and the sites and everything. They're looking at it. They're more impressed with our know-how, with our universal partner advantage than the digital tools. The digital tools are definitely useful. They knew they existed pre-COVID. We haven't stopped. We're not going to stop. We're going to continue on the Industry 4.0 journey pretty much across the board, all factories. But that has not been a differentiator yet.
Okay.
Yeah, I think for customers, it's all about understanding what that digital dividend is. Where does that Industry 4.0 strategy offer them a benefit rather than just making you more efficient? And I guess if you're more efficient, you're more competitive, so there's an advantage there. But it should be about that visibility and additional information, and maybe that agility and resilience when we do have disruptions. I just wanted to go back to what you were saying about supply chain being 3/4 of the challenge and the issue, and we talk a lot about where stuff is being made and where stuff is being assembled, and it comes up constantly on this show. The supply chain is really, really significant in that, and China has, it maybe started with low-cost labor, and that's how it opened the door, but it's definitely kept the door open with fantastic supply chain, fantastic logistics. Do you see anyone able to compete with that around the world as a geography? And do you see that shifting a little bit? Are there better supply chains in India, Vietnam, and Mexico than there have been in the past? And will there be a correction?
Definitely, China has mastered this over the 30 years. So we tell the customer, China is not going anywhere. We're going to take the advantage of what we've done in China. I mean, 15 years ago, I was manufacturing everything in San Jose or Florida and shipping it to Asia after the NPI. Today, I'm looking at actually one of the customer. When I put on a paper, I was kind of skeptical when I told them, hey, I'm going to do NPI in China and move it to Vietnam. They're like, really? I'm like, I'm going to optimize the process so well that when it goes to Vietnam, you just cut and paste, follow the process, and then you get the best of the low labor cost. So to answer your question, to get to the China supply chain, we're talking years for any of the countries or the geographies to get into. But what I was trying to mention to you was 2 years ago, when I went to the supplier and then I said, hey, if you don't manufacture this in Mexico, you won't be part of the supply chain, they would take me very lightly. They'd be like, okay. But today, we're telling them the same thing. If you want to be in our next generation server product, you must do this sheet metal in Mexico. They're like, come into the discussion, how do we do it? So you guys were talking earlier about the, how the government incentives play a role into where we manufacture everything. We don't want to wait for the government. So what we did is actually, we took these investors, predominantly, most of them are either Taiwan, China, Malaysia-based suppliers, whether it's a power supply or whether it's a sheet metal. We're telling them, come to Juarez. We will broker a meeting between the Juarez government and the New Mexico government, and then put everything on the table. Let's see what incentives you can get and what investments that you wanted to bring, and then why don't you start doing the process here? That has been doing so well, in this COVID tariff environment. We have we're going to manufacture our next generation server program with a local supply chain. Yeah, will it be as competitive as China in terms of just sheet metal? Probably not. But I'm not paying the 4 weeks worth of 6 weeks worth of material in the ocean, or I'm waiting. It's all just in time. Vendor owns all the inventory and they bring it to me 2-3 days before the manufacturing. So those things are happening, and we're not waiting for the government incentives. We're bringing them to the table, both on the investors, both manufacturers, at the same time the local government. We have a leader that's amazing in our Mexico factory. He's a GM for the factory. And we talked about this 2 years ago, and what he has done over the last 2 years, it's been amazing. And the customers look at it, it's like, wow, we haven't completely done it, but they see the path and they see the transformation, and it's going to happen. I think the same thing will happen in Vietnam, same thing will happen in Malaysia, right? But China, to get to the China scale or to get to the China Center of Excellence, I think we're talking long term.
Yeah, and that building up of capacity in Mexico and the government support, and actually, thank you, Ram, great segue into government incentives, which I wanted to talk about anyway. But the Mexican government's been really friendly and really constructive and generally pretty positive on that. I know, Ron, you've got a team down in Guadalajara that are helping companies develop what they're doing down there. Do you think they've been really smart about that? Do you think it's a great example of how governments do need to work to build supply chain? Ram, perhaps you can take that first, but I'd be really interested on your view as well, Ron.
We are seeing enormous support from the local Chihuahua government. We're talking to the top, pretty much the head of the person that in charge of these incentives. And New Mexico government has been very helpful as well. And couple those two with the investors in Taiwan, where the cost of capital is, or borrowing costs are significantly less compared to the U.S., and they have a more appetite to invest in manufacturing compared to for us. You start a startup company, in Silicon Valley with the hardware, your valuation would be 1/10 of a software company, right? So we're in a different world, but Taiwan is still hardware centric. We can borrow money. We can borrow money at rates very attractive, and they would love to own the real estate. So there's a lot of things that, it's not strategy, it's by design that happens. And then we've definitely seen huge support from both governments. And I think if the federal government comes and gives something more, we're going to benefit. So we want to be a DocuSign or a Peloton, rather than, wait for those things to happen and then go invest, right? So invest in technology, be ready. If investment comes, it'll be on steroids. So
I think you hit a really interesting point about not only differential in cost of capital, but differential in expectations for return on capital. I was looking at it yesterday when we were talking, but I think you as a company, I think your return on invested capital is around 6.5. Is that right? Which, for a lot of American companies, if their cost of capital is 4, the spread isn't big enough.
Correct.
And, if you're going to, we were talking a couple of shows ago about, how do we help rebuild the semiconductor infrastructure here, right? I mean, a new fab is $10 billion, right? And so first you got to come up with the capital, and you have to show that it is going to earn the type of returns that people that have $10 billion are seeking, right? And so, you look at Snowflake. Snowflake went public yesterday, biggest, software IPO ever. It doubled on the first day, right? They left $4 billion on the table. There's just so many people looking for those types of returns that, hey, let's go, build a new factory, and let's go put in the best lines, and let's say that we get, better than industry average returns because we're really good. Okay, so what does that mean? 3 points before tax, right? And so you have to have almost no working capital in it to actually get an ROIC on that. And so I think that's a big part of it. But Phil, to answer your question about, the Mexican government, my experience is that the local governments, the individual state governments are very helpful, very open, and in a way that I don't think most U.S. states can. They have some of the same limitations, but they're willing to get involved in helping to remove obstacles. I've got story after story after story of either myself or colleagues building new factories in the U.S. and whether it's a permitting issue, whether it's an occupancy issue, whatever it is, just the myriad of little things that get in the way that can cost millions of dollars a week if you don't resolve them, and yet they're seemingly meaningless issues. And so I do think the Mexican government has done a much better job of that than we have.
Yeah, I think they've set some great examples. So it kind of segues really interestingly into government incentives. Lots of debate around that right now because we're fully in election season. As Rod says, we're going to hear supply chain and manufacturing mentioned in presidential debates for the first time in many cycles. And I'm curious from both of you, if you were running for that role, what incentives would you be putting in? I talk to CEOs and a lot of them are like, just give us the money, we know how to spend it. But what are the incentives that the government can sensibly put in that are constructive for manufacturing and are going to help US manufacturing jobs?
Well, I think
big question, I know.
Well, I think one of the tricks is, how do you put incentives in place that don't run afoul of the WTO or something like that, right? I mean, what is the difference between, an incentive and, an excess level of government support, right? I mean, we've been, going back and forth with the EU about their support of Airbus for, 15 years. So it's a little bit tricky in that you have to walk the fine line between, creating a catalyst, but not creating, an ongoing crutch. So I think there are a couple of things. I do think on the capital front, if there was some way that the government could make available lower cost capital, or could backstop the return on that capital. If you wanted to go build, say, a fab, or if you wanted to go build, some kind of lights out operation that's building power supplies that are normally built in China, how do you attract the capital, and then how do you backstop that capital to make sure that the risk reward is more commensurate with what the investor is looking for? And I think the government could play some initial roles there. I also think there could be some stuff on, equalizing the labor cost, and not necessarily direct labor, because as Ron will tell you, direct labor as a percentage of the total cost of that server is mice nuts. But it's not just direct labor, right? Every time you have a robot, you need technicians to do stuff, you need programmers. So we're not very well positioned with either the quantity or the quality of those people in the United States to really take on a lot of this manufacturing. So some programs for getting people trained where the cost of that is not borne by just in time, we're going to train them on the line, right? Or I'm sorry, on the job training. And something where if you are creating these better jobs, which is the whole reason we want to bring manufacturing, that there could be some type of, offset to the cost of that. If you look at how a lot of, states look at incentives, what they look at is how much tax revenue will you be bringing to my state? And not just you as an enterprise, but, the lunch shop down the street that's going to be bringing you guys your sandwich and stuff. And so they go, okay, the total economic impact of this is X, and therefore, if I put in anything less than X, I get a return on that. But being able to do that specifically on the labor side to a known benchmark so that you can kind of seek to equalize it up front. And then once the skill set comes, once the scale comes, if you kind of taper that down. So some kind of sliding incentive around skill-based employment and the development of skills.
Yeah, I think skills are huge. What do you think, Ram for president? What are you going to throw out there as your manufacturing and supply chain policy?
Well, I think I was listening to Ron. I'm like, he's definitely expert. He's done it so many, but I totally agree with him what he said. The only couple of points I would like to add would be, I cannot run for president, but I want to make it clear, right? So definitely what I would like to bring though is give the industry, don't do it, just for incentive and incentive purpose. Give incentives to the industries that make sense. You're talking about healthcare. You would like to, that's something you don't want to depend on someone else. So maybe healthcare deserves some, right? Or, for example, electric car. We would like to, the US government, US companies have invested so much into IP, so much into technology. Don't lose that to another country, as a, like what we, done in the past, if that's what the United States, feels that way, right? We're in the global economy. We all benefit from each other. Consumers are globally. So we wanted to do what is right globally. And, at the same time, incentivize to protect the core assets. I know Ron mentioned about, skill-based incentive, but to be honest, if someone asked me, hey, Ron, can you build 18,000 servers per month in the US? My first thing would be, can I give you a different answer? Because the skill is not available. We moved into service industry a long time ago to bring that scale or bring that technology, even, the DL cost, like Ron said, is, a small percentage. But still, once it moves to US, it becomes a decent amount of percentage, right? And can you get somebody, Uber's paying $15 an hour, I don't know if I'm interested in coming and working in manufacturing, 8 hours, 9 hours, listening to your bullshit and, getting paid $20 an hour. No, you don't have the labor. So get the skilled labor to the industries that drive, that benefit inside the country. Like for me, medical, electrical, electric vehicles, those are the kind of industries that United States has a huge advantage. Keep that one, right? And not go after, hey, can you make this smartphone in the US? It's like, it's can the consumer, as a consumer, am I willing to pay $20 for more for my phone that I'm making? Yeah. Can you make it for $20 more? Absolutely, yes. Lights out automation, $20 delta. Absolutely, we could make it. But where are you going to get the people from?
Yeah. And I wanted to, before I get a bunch of hate email, when I say we don't have the skills, we don't have the skills in scale.
Correct.
Right? I mean, 18,000 servers, it takes a lot of people with a lot of different skills to go do that. And, we've been talking about, we want, not we, but some people have been talking about, we want all the iPhones, built in the US. It's just not really possible or practical. And it would take years and years and years of planning, and it would take billions of dollars in investment just to have a real shot at it. But is that, like Ram's saying, is that really, what we want to do is create a, economy based on, assembling product? Or do we want to look at, what are some of the higher tech types of manufacturing that are going to build the jobs of the future?
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right, Ron. And I think what's clear is we don't want to build China in the US. It's picking the right products. And as Ram said, it's all about picking the right industries. We've got about 5 minutes later. I just wanted to wrap up by touching on kind of the future of the EMS industry. We've been in a year where COVID has shone a light on everything that's good and everything that's challenged in the EMS industry. You talked about your 7 initiatives. You're obviously going through a stage now where you're thinking of what the next initiatives might be. What do you see as the big changes in the industry, the big challenges? And are we in for a period of real innovation in terms of the way the EMS industry operates?
Very, very loaded and good question. To me, the answer is simple. Listen to your customer, listen to their needs, understand their needs. Don't show what values you bring as a company. Show the solutions to the problems that they have today and tomorrow. Just not focus on the COVID today, because COVID would be gone, a year from now. It would be like, we went through some major things like 9/11. Our airline industry has changed. It takes me 2 hours to get on a plane, really upset, but you get to live with it. COVID would be the same. But what is next? What industries are going to move here? What would be needed for customer, 5 years from now, 10 years from now? Have those open, honest discussions with the customer, and then try to provide the solutions and then get them ready for a long future, rather than, yes, I can move today from China to Vietnam to India. Those are tactical discussions that will happen, but listening to the customer and understanding their needs, but keeping in mind the nationalistic views are going to dominate, whether we like it or not. Or 3 of us, we absolutely don't like it. It's pretty obvious, right? We see the world as flat, right? But we're probably minority in this, right? So knowing that Indonesia needs Indonesia solution, Brazil needs Brazil solution, United States needs its own solution. Come up with those kind of solutions for customer and be ready for them.
Yeah, that idea of aligning your strategy with the customer strategy and then driving the tactics from there, I think is very, very smart and very significant. And I think obviously their demands are changing. Ron, what do you think? A period of revolution?
Well, I don't know about revolution, maybe expedited evolution. What needs to be different, except for servicing the really large companies, like Apple and companies like that. for the average company that is outsourcing, I think there is differentiation to be had and money to be made in having the EMS provider better represent and better manage the supply chain upstream from themselves. And so many OEMs think of, well, my supply chain is Wistron, my supply chain is Sanmina, my supply chain, and that's all the further it goes. Now, when you're developing products like Apple, I mean, they are 3 or 4 levels up there, and they're helping to fund innovation and stuff like that. For the average company that's spending, 50 or 100 million bucks, they're really relying on the EMS company to be the supply chain manager. And I think most EMS companies don't do that very well, specifically around design for supply chain, right? We talk about design for manufacturability, we talk about design for tests and reliability, but if we could develop tools and mechanisms for better incorporating the capabilities of the key upstream suppliers into the design process, I think we could get a shorter design process that would lead to a more effective supply chain early on. And I think that many OEMs would be willing to pay a premium for that performance boost and for the certainty that these things are happening for the supply chain. And I think COVID laid a lot of that bare. I mean, so many people wanted to call up, Foxconn and say, is your factory up and running? Okay, what you need to know is the 100 factories that are delivering to Foxconn today that have your stuff in the back of the truck, are they up and running, right? So it's a chain. And being able to represent that chain to your customers and being able to shape what's going on upstream, I think could be pretty powerful.
Yeah, and I love that term, expedited evolution. I'm going to use that, and Ron's going to spot that in an article I write in the next couple of weeks and say, hey, that was mine. But I think it's a very valid point. I think we rarely see revolution in our industry, but when we have a impactful year like we have this year, the idea of accelerating change is important. Few of the things that I thought Ram said that were really important today in terms of that change are things like partnership and collaboration, the speed at which you innovate, that aligning with your customer both strategically and tactically and even geographically, using digital transformation as a tool to do that. And lastly, that whole product life cycle, the getting involved from the very start. And by offering that to your customer, it allows you to add more value, but it allows you to do exactly what Ron was saying in terms of connecting the design to the way the product's manufactured, the way the supply chain operates, the end of life of that product, and having that digital thread, but that design thread that runs all the way through. We are at the top of the hour. We're just about out of time, guys. Is there anything you'd like to add as we wrap up? Perhaps start with you, Ron, and let Ram have the last word.
Ram, thank you very much. It was really great to catch up and to get your input, and especially to think about some of the things that are driving the investments and the geographic expansion from the big Taiwanese ODMs, which, like you said, I mean, they, between the top 5, I mean, they're probably 80% of the industry. And so that was really interesting to hear.
Phil, thank you for the invite. Ron, it was nice catching up. I've learned a lot from you guys. Listen to you guys, every 2 weeks now, right? So keep up the good work, because, it's very educational. It's a different perspective. There is no right or wrong answer. Like we talked about on the COVID, whether you lock or you don't, there is no right or wrong answer, right? There is a, fine balance between, what's most important for you. So thank you again.
No, thank you, Ram. It's been excellent. And as you say, diverse opinions is where we get the most value. So thank you for being an audience member in the past, but much more importantly, thanks for being our star guest today. We've really appreciated that. Thanks again, Ron. Thanks to everybody in the audience. This will be available on demand in the next few days, and there will be a podcast on Monday. So look forward to talking again in a couple of weeks. In the meantime, thanks again, everybody, and stay safe.